DocsAutomator is now a verified community node in n8n. That means from whatever data source, hundreds or thousands of apps that n8n integrates with, you can now seamlessly generate flexible documents, pixel perfect documents based on Google Docs templates. And in this short tutorial, I want to show you a sample workflow, but it features how to add regular values, but also how to add line item values to your documents, and hopefully gives you an idea on how to customize the use of DocsAutomator in n8n to your use case. Without further ado, let's get into it. Yeah, let's look at our use case first. I want to use Notion as our data source. So I have this Notion setup and I would like to create project summaries for projects that I'm managing in Notion. Notion makes sense as a data source here because Notion isn't natively integrated in DocsAutomator right now. So it makes sense that we use an automation platform like n8n to generate documents out of it. Pretty simple structure. I have projects here and then I have tasks that are related to it. And these related tasks we want to print in a table, so-called line items table, which is a bit more complicated usually because the data has to be prepared for line items. So that's why I wanted to include it in this tutorial, because then you're really set up to adapt this to many, many use cases that you might have. Let's look at DocsAutomator. If you create a new automation in DocsAutomator, you select the data source. And in this use case, we, of course, select n8n, and then we need a document template. I've already prepared a template here, which is this project summary template, which you, by the way, also find in DocsAutomator's template library. And then it just has a couple of placeholders here on a second page under project overview, like the name, client email, and status. And then we have this line items table. This is DocsAutomator syntax. So basically, in order to add line items to your documents, you have to use line underscore items underscore one, because this is the first one, and then just regular variables for the line item variables. You can either basically memorize this and use it like this, or you can also here on the right side use this little helper in order to add line items to your templates if you're customizing a template for your use case. That's all we need to do. So we've added this here under number 2 as our template. We could test this already here in order to see how it looks, because this is independent from the data we're sending from n8n. This is just to see like basically how the document is rendering. But without further ado, let's jump into n8n. I've already created this to make this tutorial a bit shorter, but let's quickly go through it. So the trigger is a Notion trigger, which is a polling trigger, which basically every minute polls our Notion database and basically says when a page is updated in the database. So in this case, when a page gets updated here in this projects database that I've selected here, then this would fire. Let's fetch a test event here. So in this case, we get the website redesign project, which is finished. That's good, because next thing is we have a filter where we basically filter for those that are finished. So this one will pass. And then we want to get the related tasks. We do this with the database page resource and then get many. And then we need to select our database, which is the task database. And we need to say where projects, that's a field here on the task database, where projects contains the ID of our parent record, which in our case is this project record. So if I execute this, we should find 3 tasks, which are here. Let me run this in a table to make it a bit more visible. So we get 3 tasks, and we get the 3 tasks that are connected to website redesign, basically these 3. Homepage design, which we find here, responsive testing, content page setup. Now we have basically all our tasks. Now we need to transform that data so it meets DocsAutomator's line item syntax that is needed in order to print this table of data. We do this with an edit fields node here in n8n. And basically in here, we're defining the fields in every line item, which is name and notes. And we find this in the template. If we go into the line items table, it's declared here. You see name and notes. So these are the 2 line item variables that we have here. So we need to basically give the variables on every line item level. So name and notes. And then we've just connect this here to the name. This is the name of the task. And then the notes to the property nodes here. That's it. So now, due to the way n8n works, is basically repeating this over every task that we send it. So the output of this were 3. So if we run this now, we will also see 3 again here. If we look at the JSON, there we see it. Basically, we have these name nodes combinations in every object, it's called, in here. Yeah, next thing is that we need to aggregate this in order to turn these 3 basically into one list. And Notion has n8n, sorry, has this node called aggregate for that, so we can use that. And now basically the output is this one array that we can use. As you can see here, we can also give it a name, which is very handy because that's exactly how DocsAutomator expects this to be passed. So line items 1 would be the name. If you, by the way, have a second, third, etc. line items table, then this would be _2, _3, and you find that in DocsAutomator's documentation. For now, we call this line items 1, and then in here you see this is an array, a list of objects of every single object that we've defined before. Now it's already time to use the DocsAutomator node. So as you can see here, you will find DocsAutomator as a node in n8n, and then here you can add your credentials where you basically give your API key, which in DocsAutomator you find under settings and then API key. That's where you copy that API key to then add it in here. I've already done that for my DocsAutomator account. The resource then is document. As you can see here, there are a couple more resources, and I briefly mentioned them at the end of this video. But what we want is document, and then the operation is creating a document basically. We need to then select the automation. The automation is in DocsAutomator here, so every one of those is an automation. In this case, called project summaries. So I can select this project summaries automation here. Please note that only automations that have n8n's set as a data source or API set as a data source are selectable in n8n for creating documents. Then we automatically basically get the lists of placeholders from our template. So the template that is connected here on the automation under number 2, we already get a list of the placeholders that are found in that template. So if we jump back into the template, we saw that here we have project name, client email, status. So we also find these basically here again. So these are the 4 variables, the 4 placeholders outside of line items. To that we're coming in a bit. And now we're just basically, we can just drag and drop these from left in here. All of these come from the triggering project record, right? So the project name, if for instance, is just this project name. So I can literally, I've gone to expression mode here, but then I can literally just drag and drop that in. I'm doing the rest for the name, the email, and status as well from our triggering project record. And then we get to the line items part. So this is a separate category here. We can select line items 1 because we only have one line items table in our template. And then we need to pass our items. And these items we actually just get from our aggregator. So from the aggregate node that we've used before here as line items 1. So also here, we're literally just dragging this and adding it here. And that's all we need. That's now basically we already have the correct syntax in order to pass it to DocsAutomator. The syntax is the key line items 1, line _items _1, and then an array, a list of objects, basically what we've set up before. And the terminology isn't really important. Just follow things basically as done here in the tutorial, just so you've heard sort of what this is. So the lowest thing is an object with like key value pairs of placeholder and value. And then that entire thing is an array, a list of those objects, and every object in there, so every list item becomes one row in the table. We can now generate a preview from here. We could select preview mode. Sorry, we can now generate the document from here, but we could select preview mode. Preview mode basically allows us to generate previews. You can select this from here. This is more like if you want to set this dynamically, maybe also. Otherwise, you could also enable this from DocsAutomator's interface by going into preview mode. Quite handy because it doesn't consume any credits then on your account, so you can test this till you're ready. It'll come out with watermarks though. So we wait a second till this is done. There we go. Now we get a URL back from DocsAutomator called PDF URL. Basically, this should say success, and then you know things have gone correctly. And then we get our created document. So we have our name, our client name, project name, the client email, our status, and then the list of those 3 tasks with the name and the notes of that task. If I'm happy with this, then we can also test this in non-preview mode. So I just disable this here on the automation, but you could have done exactly the same here conveniently in n8n. But if I execute this again, now we get a proper document that will also consume a document credit for creating. So I can open this. So now we don't have watermarks anymore. And we, of course, get exactly the same output. Last step now is to come full circle to update our Notion database. So in Notion projects, this was the triggering record. I've created a files field here called report, and then basically said the database page is the resource we want to update. We reference by ID, the ID we get from the trigger, so the triggering row in that Notion database, and then we can just select the field here, which is report. So we've seen this report, and then we give the name of file URL, and the file URL we get back from DocsAutomator as the PDF URL that we just drag and drop in here. And if we do this, then we see that now the report is being added here to our Notion database. One thing to keep in mind, though, is that Notion does not copy this into its own storage at this point. I'm not a Notion expert, so maybe there is a way to do that, but that's how I saw it now. That basically keeps a reference to the document being stored somewhere else. In this case, as you can see here, this is stored on DocsAutomator's storage bucket. So in this case, if you wanted to keep this, you would actually have to go into DocsAutomator and change the PDF expiration here under number 4 to something like, maybe you want to keep it for a year or so, just so the document keeps being available. Otherwise, it would be the default setting is actually immediate expiry, which means after a couple of minutes, the document isn't available anymore, and then it couldn't be opened anymore. I hope that helps. I hope that gives you an idea of how the n8n integration in DocsAutomator works, how to create documents with it. As I said before, I briefly want to show you the other things that are possible with the DocsAutomator node in n8n. So let me just add another node here, where basically you can interact with the DocsAutomator API in every way, basically. So on automations, and automation, as I said before, is this here. These are automations, like project summaries was our automation that we just used. So you can create automations, you can delete automations, duplicate, you can get an automation. If you want to read some property on it, you can get a lot of automations, and you can also update automations. You can grab the placeholders from a connected template. So these are all the placeholders that we have on the, as we saw before, on the template that we've connected on our automation. You could actually also duplicate a Google Doc here. Let me just show you how to get this automation and what it entails. There we go. So you get all sorts of properties that are set on this automation, and then you could also dynamically change those properties. So this is convenient if you wanted to build fully integrated workflows with DocsAutomator, where you would allow someone to create automations from outside, change a template dynamically. There are many use cases where that comes handy. Of course, the main thing that most users want to do with the n8n node is, of course, creating documents from something that is from automations that are set up in DocsAutomator already. I hope this gave you a good idea. Let me know what you're building with it. And for now, I wish you happy automating.